One of the things on Zoom that I'm still getting used to, even after a year, is when everybody's quiet at once and you start wondering, is your sound working? Or is everybody just being quiet?
Maybe everyone's on mute or they've been muted by the host. You never know. Or your sound could be dead. You're right.
Matt, we're only missing Carla, John, and Liam.
Okay. Let's see.
And
I
it
have
is
3:31. Should we wait another minute or two? Because as far as you know, they're all coming, right?
Yep.
Okay.
As far as we know.
Why don't we give another minute or two to our friends? And hope they haven't fat fingered anything along the way, which happens to me. Got to be careful with that X button in the upper right-hand corner, I find. You may end up Xing out of everything, and sometimes that's not my intent.
Pat, I assume that's you that's coming up as Rochelle, correct?
Looks like Pat.
It
Yeah.
does look like Pat.
I heard another beep.
That's John.
Yeah.
John. Okay.
So now all we're missing is Carla.
Carla, okay. All right, let's give Carla another minute.
And Liam.
And Liam, okay. Oh, we certainly want Liam.
Yeah, Liam's no longer home, so I can't speak for him.
Okay. Which means you have no idea where he is, right?
That's,
Sue?
you're right. Exactly.
I know the feeling all too well. Okay. Tina, I heard a couple beeps.
Here's Liam.
Liam's in. All right, good. Tina, do you see Carla?
I do not.
Okay.
Hi, this is Ed from Fluent Energy. Just want to test my audio. Can anyone hear me?
We can.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Somebody just dinged in, but they didn't.
Okay. I wonder if that's Carla.
Could be. You might as well
Also
get
jumped
started.
in and out.
Now you're Pat.
Yes, I jumped in and out, so that may have been my
Right.
name.
That was a quick identity change. I guess Pat went into a phone booth, huh?
Like Superman.
And changed his costume. Tina, do you see Carla or a phone number that might be Carla's?
I do not. I only
Okay.
see one phone number and we've ID'd that, so.
Okay, good deal. All right. Well, let me suggest that we go ahead and start nonetheless. How's that? All right. Well, once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 7th meeting now. On behalf of Co-Chair Michael Udelson, I trust everyone is staying warm and healthy now that February has rolled into existence. I do want to welcome special guest speaker today, Sean Murphy. We'll have the floor later on this afternoon. Mike Garland, by way of announcements, and we have several this afternoon. Before we get started with Sean Murphy, I know DES has a new solid waste administrator. Would you kindly introduce Yasmin to us?
Yes, I would be more than happy to. And Jasmine Guevara comes to us by way of the New York State DEC, where she spent 5 years in their materials management group in solid waste, very familiar with many of our facilities here in Monroe County and in the region of Region 8. And Jasmine also worked for the city of Syracuse, so she has some great municipal experience in green infrastructure, sustainability, and was an outstanding candidate when her resume came across my desk to replace Luann Meyer. Many of you know and have worked very closely with Luann Meyer, who did a wonderful job. She's back in the consulting world. And but I was just so thankful when Jasmine, whom I'd never worked with, and I didn't even know Jasmine when she applied. And I quickly learned through our interviews that she would be an outstanding candidate for the solid waste administrator. Now that's kind of an archaic title. It goes way, way back in Monroe County history, and I won't get way into the details on it, but it's not as reflective as really what we're doing. You know, it's all about resource recovery and sustainability and things like that. But we chose to retain the title, but nevertheless, Jasmine is here. We'll be picking up where Luann left off with running our solid waste operations, including the Millsea landfill, Eco Park, our transfer station, our residential recycling operation, as well as a very, very important part is our public outreach and education in the community. And as you'll soon learn when I give Jasmine a moment in just a moment to talk a little bit more about her background, she's bilingual. So that's very helpful in getting the word out to our Spanish speaking population here, whether it's in the city or in the county. And so Jasmine's on a very steep learning curve, but she's doing a great job already. And without further ado, I think I'll just turn it over to Jasmine to say a few words about herself and her background.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike, and welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me. Jasmine Guevara, I'm from Colombia. I came to United States in 2004 to pursue a master's in environmental science and land community planning, and I stayed for a second master there at ESF in landscape architecture. I worked before in Colombia in consulting on rain sewers, and I was hired by Stephanie Miner when she became the mayor to work on the planning and sustainability. Then I worked at the Parks Department and then at the Water Department, and eventually joined the DEC in the Solid Waste Division. I was the material management engineer for the Hakes landfill, and so participated in other programs, recycling, hazardous waste, and so on. So that's it.
Thank you, Jasmine. We're delighted to have you on board at the county and as a member of our Monroe County Climate Action Advisory Committee whenever you can join us. So terrific. Thanks for the quick introduction and welcome once again.
Okay.
I just want to remind all members that our meetings have been recorded, and these meetings now are posted on the county website under the quick link if you want to return to a previous meeting and listen to the audio visual. Number of announcements, but first let me ask my esteemed co-chair, Michael Udelson, to just lead approval of the January minutes, and then we'll move forward. Mike, thanks.
You would think after a year of Zoom, I would remember to unmute myself. Yeah, as Matt said, the minutes from our January meeting were attached to the email that also had the agenda. And thank you, Tina, for an excellent job on those. And if anybody has a question, we'd entertain that, but otherwise we'd be looking for a motion to approve those minutes. Everyone's muted, so you'll have to raise your hand or somehow other gesture. Sue is willing to make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second Michael.
Second, okay. Is there any discussion or questions on that? Okay, if not, all in favor, give a little wave. Or any opposed? Thank you, and the minutes are approved.
Okay, wonderful, Michael. Thanks so much. Number of announcements before we introduce our guest speaker, Sean Murphy. First and foremost, I want to congratulate and send kudos to one of our own members. We do have a bona fide celebrity on the committee now, none other than Liam Smith, who testified Wednesday, January 27th on behalf of the New York State Youth Climate Leaders at the marathon New York State budget hearing, which I understand went on for 11+ hours. Catherine Walker did send an email to committee members on Thursday, the 28th of January, with the MP recording. So please, by all means, watch and listen to Liam. You'll be really impressed with his content knowledge and professional demeanor and poise. So Liam, congratulations, great effort. We're really proud of you. I'll ask any other committee members to share their insight. And Liam, if you'd like to say a few words or so, by all means, now that you've attained celebrity status with us.
I just wanted to, before Liam does, I just wanted to mention that I watched all 11 hours of the hearing. No, I didn't. I watched Liam's part. My favorite part of it, Liam, you did a great job, but my favorite part was down in the corner the screen, just like on C-SPAN, it's I had your title, Director of Governmental Affairs for the New York Youth Climate Leaders. That was the best seeing that. So congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was not expect to have to wait 11 hours, but it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. And I think we're making progress on the fossil fuel subsidies front. So that's good.
Good deal. Well, congrats again. And
Yeah,
great
well
work.
done.
Yeah,
Great work.
very much so. Good, good. Let me move forward. I'll just ask Michael Ulison and or Mike Garland, and if Fred and Carla are on line as well, if there is a legislative update for committee members.
Yeah, on behalf of my colleagues from the legislature, I'll just mention, we talked previously about the CPACE program and hoping that that could be offered. And I did ask the county executive's office to review that. That's the process before something comes to the legislature, that they would have the administration review it and then make a referral back to the legislature if they felt is appropriate. And I know that's still being worked on. And maybe Mike Garland, you could just give us a quick overview of what that means.
Thank you, Michael. Yep, we are reviewing that internally. And I'm glad we're at that point where we're really digging into the details. I brought in the necessary stakeholders from within the county. Pat Gooch was part of the call, and Clem Chung as well, our deputy director here in DES, as well as folks from the law department and our finance department, and even real property, because it touches different aspects of county government. We just need to make sure we cross our T's, dot our I's, and really drill into the details and make sure we completely understand what the county's obligations are. Also the benefits, which I think are very apparent. But that group had looked at the program in the past when the program wasn't quite as attractive for counties. In fact, it placed a lot of liability on county and other governments that have the authority to place liens on property. So what I can report back to you is that so far so good. Those that have been involved in the review, some of those obstacles have been removed. So I think it's looking more favorable. The next step for me is to sit down with some of the other members that were on that call and brief the administration and again, and then put a process in place to move forward. So it's no guarantee we're moving forward yet, but I think all indications are that it looks very favorable. Pat, is there anything there that I missed? I know you were part of the call, but I think overall it's looking, you've had experience with the program in the past, and I think it's looking good.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's much to add.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Yeah,
deal. Perfect.
so I'll just, thank you both for your work on it, and also just acknowledge and thank my colleagues from this committee, Legislator Ansello and Legislator Boyce, for their support.
Good deal. Thank you, Michael. Moving on, I did want to take a moment and send kudos to the county for taking the Climate Smart Communities, or CSC pledge. By passing the 10-point CSC pledge as a resolution, Monroe County has become a registered climate smart community now, which is really a first step toward eventual certification. So congratulations to the county. Mike Garland and Clem Chung, if you'd like to speak for a moment or two on upcoming plans, especially integrating CEC and CSC at the county level. Tell us what's next and what role, if there is one, for our community, by all means.
Yep, and I will turn it over to Clem, and he can talk about, Clem's asked to be directly involved with it, and he's going to take responsibility to shepherd that process forward in parallel with our climate action plan. But Clem, do you want to add a bit to that?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, first of all, I wanted to give kudos to this group, because I know that before I landed here at the county, there was definitely a push that got the legislature to pass the pledge, pass the resolution. That was really the heaviest lift in getting the county registered. Everything else was just filling in some forms, just administrative bureaucracy. But we are now registered. That obviously opens up some doors for us. There's a long way for us to go before we can get certified either at the bronze or the silver level. There's a lot of actions that need to be taken. But the nice thing is that it completely dovetails with the process that we're going through for the climate action plan. So many of the things that are necessary that this body will be advising on and providing direction to that process will also be the kinds of things that we need to gain those points so we can move closer to certification. There were a couple of things that I wanted to just bring up from the information that DEC sent to us. So I'm going to try and share my screen. See if I can pull this up. So I'm not sure if this is showing up. That's the right screen.
We can see.
So you can see the tweet.
Yes, thanks. Yeah,
Okay,
we
so
can see
this is the
screen.
tweet that DEC put out, and it congratulates Monroe County. So if you look up DEC, if you have a Twitter account, please, I would encourage you to retweet that and build recognition of the fact that the county is now registered. The other thing that I think is nice that we may want to discuss is, let's see. I can't find the screen on that, but there is a logo that goes along with the registration that just says that we are a New York State registered community, and they encourage the county to include that in their official documentation. So it could be on the website, could be on our letterhead. You know, this is something that I'm sure we'll have further discussions on, you know, within county government, but it's a nice recognition that people across the state can, you know, they're familiar with that, the terminology, they're familiar with the iconography, and, you know, it just gets recognition for us and the path that the county is on with that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up with that, with regards to next steps of certification, there are a list of priority and mandatory actions that every community has to take. They contribute points. They don't cover the full range of points that we'd need for certification, but they may make sense for us to look at in the next few months as prioritizing, because we have to do those. The first two actions would be to appoint a CSC task force and then also a CSC coordinator. When you look through the requirements for the task force, the requirements are very similar to the charter of this body, the advisory committee, and it may make sense at some point in the future for that role to be taken on by the committee. There are some specific language that we'd have to present and make sure that the committee and the legislature and the county administration are all on board with that. Similarly, the CSC coordinator is, you know, a role that would seem to jive with what I am currently doing in terms of wrangling the information to support that. But again, you know, there's specific language, and it's something that we want to make sure that everyone is on board with that. So I just wanted to kind of throw those two things out there. If there's any discussion, if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to look into that and provide any feedback to you.
Thanks, Clem. Sounds to me that the CSC coordinator role really should be a full-time county employee, and I would agree with you that you're perfect for that role. Sounds like there could be a role for the committee to play downstream too.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I also wanted to mention that we have, the county DES has started on its process of engaging the consultant for the climate action plan, Bergman Associates. We had a meeting with them yesterday, and you know, Joe Vankoff is the project manager for that. And I don't know if that was next on the, unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the agenda.
Okay, well, go ahead. By all means, we did want to ask as to the status of the plan and the work with the consultant. So that's a perfect segue. Please go ahead, Clem, and brief us on what's happening with the consultant right now.
I will turn it over to Joe, but just to say that even though there is a lot of overlap between the two, they are two separate processes. So we do want to make sure that, you know, that there is clarity over the roles with regards to the CSC certification and the climate action plan. So we are comfortable with that internally in DES. We just wanted to kind of raise that point to the committee.
Good deal. Thank you for that insight. If Joe's on and would like to talk about the ongoing work with the consultant on the plan, this would be a great time to brief the committee.
Yes, I am on.
Joe,
Hello,
great.
Hello, everybody. To follow up with what Clem was saying, yes, Bergman, we are almost there. We're almost through the contract process. Where we will officially have them on. They've been, it's been good to us to help out up to this point, and as far as scoping things out and getting us in the right direction. Just like Clem said, yesterday we had a really good kickoff meeting. We got some good direction and we're ready to hit the ground running. It's literally just a matter of getting an executed contract, but I foresee that happening in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
Good deal.
The
Thanks.
one thing I wanted to make sure that I brought up in our internal meeting that we had yesterday at this kickoff that, and I'm sorry if it hasn't been super clear, I think most of you are under the understanding that this is really a Monroe County Operations Climate Action Plan. It's the phase 1. That's really the end product that we're hoping to get through this year, which then will essentially morph into the overall county climate action plan, which will be phase 2. So as long as that's clear with you, I see you nodding your head. That's good.
Good. I just wanted to make sure our committee members were aware there is a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they are separate and distinct. So thanks for mentioning that again, Joe.
Okay.
I had a quick question for for you and Clem and Mike and even committee members. I'm kind of curious, what did folks take away from the Ulster presentation at the last meeting? Ulster gave us, I think a solid briefing on what they did. I realize Ulster is different. We have a wastewater facility. We also have a landfill. They don't. But were there some takeaways that you found particularly valuable? Do you think they may have missed anything? For instance, might our plan look similar to theirs or different? Maybe now it's too early to tell, but I just was curious what folks thought of the Ulster presentation and what takeaways they have, what resonated with them. So I'll ask folks to feel free to chime in if they'd like to.
I'll just say, I've been I reviewed the Ulster plan. I also reviewed the City of Rochester's plan. As you said, there are differences that are specific to each community, depending on the resources they have, the assets they have. Ulster's climate action plan, the one that they presented on, as Joe mentioned, is also a government operations plan. It's a phase 1. And as Amanda was saying, they're hoping to expand that now to phase 2. Similarly, the City of Rochester did a municipal operations plan and then subsequently did a broader-based climate action plan. So in regards to the process, we're following a process that's similar to theirs. As you mentioned, I think we would definitely have some different outcomes based upon what we look at is achievable here at Monroe County. And we may end up having different goals. So that's really, a question back to the committee in terms of, do we follow the state goals? Do we follow the city's goals? There's a lot of questions that still are yet to be answered with regard to that. But that's all part of the process. And I think Pat might also have some additional insights into that.
Yeah, thanks, Clem. Pat, feel free to add whatever you'd like. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can specifically address what Clem was saying, but I will say that one of the things I took away from the presentation was, first, I was very impressed with their Director of Environmental Services. Not that I'm not impressed with ours, but knowing nothing about her, I really was impressed. And I thought that was something that I took away, is that her leadership helped make that plan successful in addition to everyone else who went with it. And so I think this body really needs to play that role of being a leader to make this move forward. So I think that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, I think our DES leader will do the same. There's no doubt. The only thing I'm going to add into what Clem said was, in our kickoff meeting yesterday, we talked about having an internal working group, and that's really, to get back to your question, that I thought it was a good presentation too, but it really relies on our people, our staff at the county to point us in the right direction of what goals and where we can achieve things. So we're definitely going to draw from these other plans, but as far as we'll have our own, that really is suited for here at us in Monroe County.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree, Joe. Thanks. Ours no doubt will be tailored or customized for Monroe County. But yeah, I agree. I'm so pleased that Kate reached out to them and they took the time to brief us on their progress and what they've done. They're about a year or two ahead of us right now, I think. So we may want to draft them in the future and continue to learn from them as to what obstacles they have, if any, and what they do to overcome them and how they push forward. So thank you.
I will also add that Ulster County is one of three other counties, I believe, across the state right now, who are registered at the CSC silver level. So they are, an exemplary county to review as a starting point, as we go through our process.
Matt,
Agreed.
I'd like to add some feedback to the conversation too.
Please.
My take from reading their document was how clear it was. Their goals were very clearly stated and just an easy document to follow, but still pretty strong goals. So I know sometimes it's harder to write a plan that's concise and easy. It's harder to write a short document that gets your points across.
That's right.
Clearly. So I was very impressed by that. And, certainly that's something I hope we can achieve with our plan as well. State those goals clearly and, make it easy for people to follow.
I think that's a great comment. Me being the manager on this, I will stress that to our consultants because I'm with you 100%. The easier it is I consider myself a layperson in this compared to all you experts. And that's what I want to see out of this is something, a clear objective or clear goals that are stated in it that everyone can really easily read and follow.
Yeah, Joe, well taken, and I agree wholeheartedly. Our customer community really is the county of Monroe, and we want them to be able to pick up the document and understand what we're trying to accomplish and why without a whole lot of technical jargon that could be incredibly confusing to them. Excellent. Anybody else?
Yep, I'll just echo what we've all been saying. It was a great presentation. We learned a lot. I learned a lot, certainly. And I like your suggestion, Matt, to kind of keep track with what they're doing so we can learn as we progress our plan. We want ours to be best in class, right? And we can learn from the others around us that have done a great job. And and I like John's point as it relates to concise. It's almost more of a challenge sometimes to really boil it down in a manner that there's substance there, but it's clear and, it's very actionable and people, we're gonna have a lot of folks, particularly the phase 2 element where it's community driven, right? Where we want a lot of eyes on this, not those of us who are in government or work around government who are, we're used to reading these documents. It's the folks outside because ultimately they're the ones who we're really going to be relying on to make that difference, And one thing I'd add to Joe's great points, the internal working group for phase 1 is we all know, that'll be more of the people that are in county government that have their hands on county operations, whether it's airport, parks, DOT, DES and others. But once we get into phase 2, that internal working group that we've talked about will broaden. That's where we'll bring in other folks from the county, whether municipal, commercial, institutional, and other quasi-governmental agencies that we want to really rely on because a lot of those are big energy consumers. In phase 1 will also involve county employees and how they come to and from work and what they can be doing as county employees. So that's all. And the Ulster presentation inspired me to suggest that we have, Sean Murphy and his team come in and talk about it because I thought I was like the way Ulster approached their challenge of greening their energy. So I'll be happy to do a quick introduction on Sean.
Good. Just a couple of other odds and ends quickly too. I wanted to shout out and thank Pat Gooch, who spoke with IDA Executive Director Anna Less. I understand she's on the March meeting agenda. But Pat, did you want to say anything quickly about the IDA and solar project activity that they may be sponsoring?
Yep. So at the end of last meeting, the question arose, what is Comida doing related to solar, whether it's supporting it in some way. And they wanted me to reiterate that they are in favor of alternative energy projects, solar, wind, whatever it may be. Over the past year, they've engaged with 2 projects specifically. Those were sales tax exemption and mortgage recording tax. They did not do pilots with those projects, but it was the choice of the developer rather than the IDA. And so they're working on that, and they're of course open to negotiations whenever that occurs. And then lastly, they said that they wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that they're looking at other tools within their disposal, not just the traditional IDA tools of tax abatement in some way. And so they're looking at what they can do to be supportive of alternative energy projects in Monroe County. And to that end, Anna would like to be here next week or next month, excuse me.
Yeah,
to
March
hear
4th
your
meeting, right?
feedback.
Mhm.
Yep.
Terrific. Thanks, Pat. So
So much for organizing that. And I would, before we go on,
please.
just like to comment on the Ulster presentation. What stood out to me is what often resonates with me, which is that the needs, the urgency of the climate crisis of reducing global emissions by 50% by 2030, which is now 9 years away, and the reality of what governments think they can do or think they can afford to do or are willing to put forward does not match. And as much as I think Ulster's plan is great and they're working very hard within those constraints, we're going to have to up our game, and we're going to have to offer more ambitious strategies. And I wonder, is anyone at the county getting involved with the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act rollout? There are small government workshops or groups. And do we have a representative there? Because we are going to have revenue, community-wide, county government-wide, whichever one you want to pick. There has to be money to do what needs to be done. So do we even have a seat at the table at those meetings as of yet? Has anyone joined into that? Does anyone know?
So I can't speak specifically for all of the different stakeholder groups that the state is working with, but I do know one of our consultants from Bergman is at a high level on one of the small working groups. So we do have a direct line there, and I believe it's the land use and environment working group to be specific.
Okay, but so I will look into the small government working group, but my impression is that there's no one in the area that's sitting on that, which might concern us, but I'll research that, get back to you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah, I definitely support that. I think it's very important that we have a clear understanding of where the state's going, so that our we want a plan that's in alignment with the state's goals too. And we also need to be aware of it. And that might be something for a future topic that we review and we educate ourselves on what are the state's goals? What are they looking at? What do we need to take into consideration with our plan so it's consistent? And if there's an opportunity for any one of us to sit on any of the committees that Sue is talking about, that might be a nice link at the state level to kind of feedback to this group.
I'm going to
along with the consultant.
to Tina this week, because there are a number of meetings coming up this month that people could sit in on and provide some feedback on.
Right.
Good deal. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Mike. And then finally, Mike, Tina sent an email about composting on your behalf. I think if I remember correctly, you were actually interviewed for the article. I'm asking you just to take a moment to talk us through that before you introduce Sean Murphy. And then my question to committee members is simply, given this information at the committee level, which is sort of a clearinghouse for all of us, are you going to make your local communities, towns, villages aware of this particular initiative? I know we in the town of Pittsford are composting out of the senior center, and we started that about a year or two ago. I'm not sure how prevalent that practice is at all, but I am encouraging committee members, once they hear Mike and read the email, to think seriously of making their communities aware that there are possibilities now in composting that are real and ongoing. Mike, go ahead.
Oh yeah, please. Thank you. I was really looking forward to meeting with Jeremy Moll. If you know Jeremy, he's been in the community a long time. I'm a big fan of the City News. I think they always do they do a great job with issues and go in depth, and they give the reader a really broad view of what's happening here in our community. And I thought that he did a nice job outlining what's happening on many different fronts. And I think what motivated him at this point was the fact that Impact Earth and community composting have merged. and Impact Earth, I believe, is in the lead on that. But that service is available to folks here in the community. Obviously, it's a paid service, but it begs a question too, with what's happening at the state level, where there is legislation in place for the larger producers of food waste organics, that they have certain obligations to meet. And then it begs the question, okay, what's happening at the municipal level? So I was asked to comment on that. And if you're familiar with the food hierarchy, it all goes back to the 3 R's, and that's what I tried to emphasize. I don't know if it was captured per se in the article, but Jeremy certainly did that they're really, landfilling is not where you want to go with food waste organics, because there's opportunities there to harness the energy. But even well before that, it's reduction, right? Not wasting the food to begin with. Or if there's opportunities like with FoodLink to use that food for others who need it. And there's often a misunderstanding with expiry dates that, oh boy, you need to chuck it out. I mean, I did that for years. We all sort of did, like, oh, it must be, contaminated, but it's not. It's still generally usable. And so there's a lot of information. So education is a big part of this, to really get the word out to folks. And that's something that we own. We really need to get that out to folks, because that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck. And carbon emissions reduction is using less, and using less, right, through reduction. Composting is pretty far down on the food hierarchy. If you look at EPA's food hierarchy, it's really not ideal. It's just one up from landfilling. But what's below landfilling, in my opinion, is putting it down your garbage disposal, because that's what and I really appreciated Jeremy capturing that. And he's, geez, I never thought about that, because a lot of people crank food waste down their garbage disposal. It's taking energy just to get it out to the treatment plant, energy to treat it. That is costly and of no benefit. So it was a nice article. And again, there is opportunity here in our community. It's quote unquote the low hanging fruit, no pun intended, with where we're going with resource recovery here in New York State. And also too, in the article, I referenced the Climate Action Plan, obviously a high priority of County Executive Bellows, and that this group in this plan will be looking at that.
Good deal. Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, I do encourage everyone to make their local governance structures aware that there are possibilities out there that they may not have known of, months or years ago. So thanks so much, Mike, for the quick update. Now, I think we've cleared all the announcements, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. Our guest speaker is Sean Murphy. Mike, would you care to introduce Sean? I can see him. He's there.
I would be. Yep. Sean is there. I'm sure he's there. And Sean is a real rock star here in environmental services. His nickname is Bird Dog, because it's Sean Bird Dog Murphy. He gets things done, and when he gets a hold of something, he sees it through. I, going back over 2 decades, was one of the groups that helped found this energy aggregation group in Monroe County. Monroe County became an ESCO, and worked with some of the folks that are on the call from Fluent Energy, formerly known as LepCorp. And it's survived the test of time. It began last century, and here it is in the 21st century. And the purpose is to reduce the cost of energy for not just Monroe County, but other municipal governments and public benefit corporations. Like, districts and things like that. So it's grown over time. The original purpose was, hey, this is for cost reduction. How can we buy, aggregate our collective energy needs and buy wholesale electricity and natural gas? It's been a successful program. It's been and Fluent Energy has been really the backbone of that. We are our own ESCO. We are an energy provider. We don't do the transmission distribution, but it's the commodity that we're after. And I think this would be a very worthwhile presentation for this group, because obviously energy is, again, low-hanging fruit for us to look at. How can we reduce our energy consumption? So it'll be helpful in phase 1 for county government, but also helpful in phase 2 for those of the other municipal partners that Sean will talk about, where we can find ways to green that energy that we're buying. How can we do that? And I know Ulster County talked about that. So Sean Murphy is a seasoned veteran here in DES, a civil engineer, and he's been involved in many great projects here in Monroe County. Very, very passionate. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sean.
All right, thanks, Mike, and I appreciate being here. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, thanks.
All right. Well, so now I've got to come across the technical parts here. There you go. All right. So the Energy Aggregation Group, and Mike, I don't want to correct you necessarily, but when we talk about terminology, I'll just clarify one thing related to the ESCO, but we'll get to that in a minute. So quickly, demographics. Monroe County is a fairly large municipality with quite a few residents, a number of towns, villages in the city of Rochester. But there are also a number of other public service groups that participate in use of energy. School districts, the water authority, fire districts, those types of things. And there are a variety of different functions and services that they provide. Some administrative, like the county clerk, where they're only using a little bit of electricity to light their operations. But there are other really energy intensive operations too, like the water authority, pure waters treatment plants. And again, the common denominator is they all use electricity. So in terms of terminology, I guess I'll get to this right off the bat. So we have been using the word or the term ESCO. Monroe County is technically not an ESCO because we do not resell energy. We only consume energy and then share our energy, if you will, with our other municipalities. So from that standpoint, as far as the Public Service Commission is concerned, we're a direct customer. They're interchangeable, right? You go make a Xerox copy, so I guess won't lose any sleep over that. But from a technical standpoint, we're a direct customer because we do not resell. We only consume and not resell electricity.
So I've been
So
calling
New York
us
State-
ESCOs for 20 years.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
That's
I thought we
okay.
were in the beginning. Anyway, it sounded good. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
jump.
Sean, ESCOs don't necessarily have a great reputation in New York State, do they? Probably another
No.
reason we want to be a direct customer, not an ESCO, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, if you do a lot of research, they're, they're the snake oil salesman and stuff, so we got to watch out for that. All right, so NISO, the independent system operator, they basically are the agency that distributes electricity. They buy it from a bunch of different sources, and anybody that needs electricity on a large viewpoint, like utilities or us, will go through NISO and deal with them to get our electricity. As far as gas, we contract right now with Marathon Power. They're the contracted gas supplier. Every few years, we go out on a competitive basis to get gas pricing for natural gas. In case you've heard it before, NFR was the previous vendor. They sold their assets to Marathon, so we went through quite an iteration with the law department and purchasing to make sure all the terms and conditions came forward. Yet we made sure that we had any kind of previous risk association with NFR carried forward, so we didn't get left holding the bag if anything went wrong. So again, as far as NISO is concerned, we're considered a load serving entity. That's just a technical term to know about in the future. Fluent Energy is our contracted technical firm that helps us with back office support, helping us with risk management, getting out to the markets, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. These are just a couple of terms about how we consume energy: decatherm for gas, kilowatt and megawatt hour for electricity. And then the renewable energy certificate, the REC, is going to be a big thing to talk about here in a minute. So a little bit of history going back to the 1980s and 1990s. Pure Waters had 3 large treatment plants. You can see it right down here at Van Laer, that's up in Durand Eastman Park by the lake. Had quite a huge solids handling situation where they would burn sludge. All 3 of these plants would burn sewage sludge, which meant we consumed an awful lot of natural gas. So back in the early 90s, there was an effort undertaken to see if we could get gas on the commercial market to help reduce cost. That was pretty successful. And just want to point out at this area, these plants are also large consumers of electricity. You see a lot of motors and things that run around here to keep things going. Also here in the back, I don't know if anybody has ever seen this structure. This is the Irondequoit Bay Pump Station behind the golf course. Looks like an apartment building. It's actually 5 floors below ground and 2 floors above ground. It's a huge, huge pump station. So even back when this thing was built, the county had always had energy conservation in the back of our minds and was always carried forward. So it would turn out, this is for the combined sewer overflow program. When it rains, water is stored in the tunnel, and then it's held in the tunnel until off-peak hours at night, and then pumped up to the treatment plant to reduce the cost of electricity. So sustainability has always been a big item with the county and DES. And speaking of sustainability, so DES does not burn sludge anymore. again, in an effort to be sustainable, biosolids are now trucked out to Mill City landfill, where they're combined with the garbage and help produce methane gas that is used for generating electricity. And it just becomes a lot more sustainable than burning it and getting rid of the sludge. So biosolids, not to put Clem on notice here, but it seems like biosolids is a pretty good area for a sustainability climate action plan thing. So I'm sure you folks will be getting into that a little bit later on. All right, so the energy aggregation group, as the state started to deregulate electrical and gas purchasing abilities in the 90s, the county then became a direct customer, or LESCO, however you want to call it now, certified by the PSC, which allowed us to buy electricity and natural gas on the wholesale market. And you can see we average about $25 million a year in annual consumption, dollar consumption, if you will, with a combined savings over 9 years of about 7%. So it's been a very, very successful endeavor. The EAG is comprised of a number of county departments, some of which consume gas, some electricity, towns, villages, and you can see like the Water Authority, Transit, Regional Transit. The Rochester City School District is a huge consumer of electricity, and a couple of fire departments. So we have agreements with each of these agencies, intermunicipal agreements, that basically we buy all the power from NISO and then back charge these agencies, if you will. So there are about almost 1,500 total accounts. There's about 1,200 electric accounts and about 300 gas accounts. And that's part of what Fluent does, right? They're our back office. So if you can imagine, there's thousands of pages of bills to go on each year as far as how we buy our gas and electricity, how it gets back charged. It's quite an onerous task, and they do an excellent job keeping track of those things for us and ensuring that we meet all of our obligations. So this will just give you a summary over the 9-year period that I could dig out of Fluent's website. So you can see we've had combined energy savings of about $16 million between gas and electricity, right? 13.5 and about 3 million, which averages about 7% energy savings over this 9-year period. So I read the meeting minutes on the Ulster situation, and again, you can see consumption-wise, we're at a higher, very, very much higher level of consumption than they are. So that's certainly something that needs to be taken into account. So I mentioned that the county has a general mindset about energy efficiency and sustainability. So every time we have an opportunity to save energy, we will. So here's an example out at the Monroe Community Hospital. There used to be steam absorption chillers out there, which have a higher energy use, less effective and less efficient. We're now replacing those with electric units that actually serve two purposes. One, they're more efficient, but because they don't rely on steam then relying on natural gas, we thereby use less natural gas. So at Iola, we have a combined heat and power plant, a CHP it's called, where we have engines that generate electricity and also boilers that generate steam over for the Monroe Community Hospital. So as part of this generation, these engines produce an awful lot of heat. About 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit is exhausted through this pipe. So what we do is we have a heat exchanger in there where we capture that heat and actually turn that into domestic hot water and try to gain some efficiencies with that. So we are reviewing right now the ability to turn these engines off and buy our power from RG&E. That does a couple of things. One, it's a little bit more cost effective now with the cost of natural gas being lower. The energy cost or the maintenance cost of these machines is high. And also, these are huge natural gas consumers. So if we can reduce our natural gas footprint, that would be a beneficial thing for us. We will still maintain these boilers to provide steam over to the hospital. So solar, you may know that we do have, we don't own them, but we are participating in a power purchase agreement, a PPA, for some large solar arrays that are around the county. And I'll give you some statistics for those in a minute. But essentially what happens, the county or the EAG buys electricity from NISO as a direct consumer or direct customer, and RG&E delivers it to us. That's how that works. The solar panels are taken as a credit. So any dollars that are generated by the solar panels are taken as a credit by RG&E before the bill gets to us. So you can see how this works in the solar array, right? We've got 5 different arrays that amount to about 13.6 million kilowatt hours, pretty good size facility. And in the last few years of operation, you can see the PPA invoices us about $3 million. We get credits of about $3.7 million. So basically we've been saving or getting a net benefit of a little over $500,000 by having these solar arrays. The way this came about is back in 2014, the county put out an RFP for a solar PV photovoltaic development program, a large group and a small group. This large group was developed by Solar Liberty, now AES, I believe. And this is a long-term project that helps the county offset the cost of energy delivery from RG&E. So the question is, are we producing green energy? And the short answer here, unfortunately, is no. What happens is because they produce the power and put it back into RG&E's grid, RG&E is actually the one that's getting the benefit of the renewable energy certification. We don't get any RECs through that. So as a result, we cannot technically claim that we're using green energy, but it's a large facility that provides a lot of benefit. So certainly from a visual standpoint, we can say that we're participating quite aggressively in the development of green energy. So just to give you a little graphic on it, right? So here's the solar array out by the Northwest Quadrant Treatment Plant. Since the power comes in and goes out to the grid, we cannot claim it as green. If the power came in and went right directly to our plant, it would be green energy. So that's an important distinction as we talk about this a little bit in the future. So the state came up, the PSC came up with their clean energy standard that requires 70% of New York's generation to be done by renewable resources in 2030. That's pretty aggressive. And in order to fund that, they make LSEs, so us as a direct customer, ESCOs, those other folks, buy these credits through NYSERDA. So we participate right now in the zero emission credit. That's the one that was developed when Ginna was going to go offline. They developed this program to help keep the nuclear industry viable, and also tier 1 RECs and tier 2 RECs. So tier 1 generators are anything that you can visualize as renewable, right? So there's solar thermal, solar PV, on land and offshore wind, hydroelectric, geothermal electric, tidal energy, which is kind of strange when you think about it, right? But the ocean comes in and out. There's quite an effort underway now to be able to harness that energy and turn it into electricity. Wave energy, ocean thermal, there's just a number of technologies that are out there that become the tier 1 RECs, and those are what we're purchasing right now. I do want to point out at this point, we're only buying the minimum amount of RECs that are required by NYSERDA and the Public Safety Commission, Service Commission. And that's where there was a statement made before, which I think is pretty important. The EAG, right now, we're looking at our fiduciary responsibility to basically get the lowest price energy we can for the county. Green energy, as you may envision, and this is going to be a topic for future discussions, carries a premium, right? At least a 15% premium on cost. So that's something that the group needs to talk about in the future is what is the goal and how much is the county willing to spend? I think Fluent came up with a number. If we were 100% renewable through the REC program, it'd be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million per year of cost, as compared to $500,000 we're saving in our solar program right now. So that's just an important consideration as things are moving forward. So the number of RECs will increase over time, right? In 21, we only have to be at about 2% of load. In 23, it's going to get up to 8.2%. Another challenge we're having in the whole REC program, and again, this will be, I think, a topic of conversation later on, is because there are such a limited number of renewable generators throughout the state, it's hard for us to actually buy all the wrecks that we're required to buy. So we have to do some offset purchasing to allow that to happen. So as far as this group is concerned, thinking about what the opportunities are for moving forward, how do we buy more RECs, which is basically the county's way of saying we're buying green energy, renewable energy, right? That's about the only mechanism we have right now. So we can buy RECs through the tier 1 and tier 2, but you can see there's $6 per REC. That's a pretty significant amount of money. If we maintain the goal that the state wants, where we're buying energy generated from within New York. We could buy RECs that are outside of New York for significantly less money, but we're not necessarily meeting the goals that the state has to produce that electricity and be sustainable in terms of our production in New York State. Another thing to consider is the community solar. That's starting to pop up. You had a little bit of a discussion about that early on. Again, if the county participates in that, we can't actually say that we're buying green energy. Well, what we can do, as we showed from the arrays that we already have in there right now, the money we're saving by going through a PPA or going through the community solar can be money that we can roll over into the purchase of RECs to help us actually say that we're buying that green energy directly. So this is a topic that's really quite interesting. It takes a couple of times to hear it to really fully understand what it means, the difference between RECs and ZECs and in-state and out-of-state. It's a very, very complicated thing. And I would suggest at some point in the future, we could probably have Fluent give a little bit of a presentation to explain how that works, where the program's going, what the minimum numbers of RECs we are going to have to purchase in the future, and what's the best way for the county to be able to say that we're actually buying that renewable green energy. So with that, be glad to answer any questions or defer any conversation to later on.
Sean, thanks so much. I had a quick question. Can you tell us why New York State RECs are so much more expensive than out-of-state RECs? What's happening there that's not obvious to the user?
Ed, could you briefly explain that?
I noticed on one of your slides that I think the cost was $6 per REC.
Yeah, I can.
There you go. But
Yeah.
out-of-state certified RECs are, maybe 1/6 to 1/3 as expensive. I'm just curious if you can explain the dichotomy.
Yeah, this is Ed from Fluent Energy. Can you hear me?
Ed, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear
no
you.
problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is one part I wanted to clarify anyway. The tier 1 REC right now is probably about $22 per REC or $22 per megawatt. So it's very expensive. It's a designation that the state came up with for brand new generators. So there's not a lot out there. NYSERDA is the one that determines this price based on the bid results that they get, the offers. So that's extremely expensive. And that tier 1 price is why the county couldn't possibly afford to have retained the RECs on its solar array, because the project would be not financially viable, because you'd be giving 2 cents per kilowatt hour up. Now, what we have here with this $6 per REC, that's about the lowest price New York State compatible REC, which, by the way, is the only thing that would work for the CSC. They won't take out of state stuff. So if you told us today that you wanted to claim that you're consuming green energy by buying RECs and you want to be New York State compliant, I would say $6 is about the cheapest that you could get a REC, and that would be sourced from hydropower in New York State. The out-of-state stuff, we're looking at likely Texas production or somewhere in the Midwest where there's gigantic wind farms. And these are high quality RECs, something that's Greenie certified or otherwise, but those may or may not be something that you can really report on in New York State. I don't believe you can get those into the New York State tracking system. But you could claim green, there are municipals out there that have done this. I think New York State's been a lot clearer recently that that is not really compatible, but some folks have done that.
Thanks.
Ed.
I wonder, Ed, if you could just explain the concept of a renewable energy credit so we all have a common understanding on the committee. That'd be enormously helpful.
Sure, it's not a physical thing. It's simply an attribute, a green attribute. So whenever 1 megawatt hour of power is produced, or 1,000 kilowatt hours, at the generator level, there's a system that tracks that output, and it's tagged with a number, and it's all works. In New York State, that's through what's called NY GATS. That's a system that tracks that. So that's all a REC is. So it's a tracked attribute.
Like a label, I guess, right?
Right.
Not really a physical entity. Yeah.
That's correct. It's completely electronic in nature. There's not a piece of paper or anything. It's all electronic. So what you're doing is separating the value of the underlying commodity. So a megawatt hour produced by a solar array or a megawatt hour produced by a coal facility, there's still a megawatt of usable energy, but you're going to separate out the tracked attribute. So
okay,
and it's set up as a way to incentivize renewable energy to be built, because they can sell RECs, whereas a new coal facility can't sell any RECs.
Thanks. I had another question. I know at least one other member on the call today has a similar question. I noticed in one of Sean's charts that the Village of Pittsford is participating in EAG. Now, the village is a subset of the town of Pittsford, and I was a town councilman for 8 years. The village is about 1,400 residents. The town, on the other hand, about 30,000. Why would the village participate, not the town? I'm just curious. Is there a decision that needs to be made, or are we looking at historical data here? I noticed too that there are quite a few other towns that aren't on this list, including Michael Uleson's home, Henrietta. Wonder if Sean and maybe Ed could shed some light on that.
Well, I think there was an effort initially to go out to everybody, all the towns and villages, and say this service was out there or this capability was out there.
Okay.
You know, we've had discussions with the city of Rochester, for instance. They're not on here, right? You'd think the city
No,
would
they're
be
not. Yeah.
a large consumer. It's probably just, I would imagine, unless you know something different technically, probably just more of a, I'll say political decision, I guess, to not participate in that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to check into that. Maybe the town is there and it's labeled incorrect. We could get a we can get a up-to-date list to Sean just to make sure.
They're contracted. They just did a municipal energy supply contract, so I know it didn't go through you. They did a separate contract. Who knows? Preference.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what the history was. This could have happened, I'm guessing, years ago.
It did. It happened years ago. I can just jump in. The history on that too was when this was first created, we went out to, Town Supervisors Association. There was the original Council of Governments was in place at the time. We presented there. Some folks felt they could still do it better. And I think since then that, we hadn't gone out and necessarily marketed this to other people. And so my guess is County Executive Bello has reconstituted the Council of Governments. If we were to present that to, and obviously leadership's changed tremendously in all these different municipalities and also school districts. So we even presented to the Monroe County School Districts Association as well too. So I think once we have a better sense too, in terms of what our options are with green energy, our goal would be then to go out and listen, the county doesn't make, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean and Ed, I don't think we make any money on this. We pass on, we recoup our cost for our consultant to do the backroom services because we bill for our, the transmission distribution. So they get a complete bill from us.
Okay.
So there's cost to that that's passed on. But as you can see, there's a lot of agencies and governments that aren't on here, but my guess is they will. And the reason I like the idea of that is if we can really dial this in and we can really have alternatives to green our energy, it's going to help us out in phase 2.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mike. I had a question for Sue then. If we now are working with Joule and Ampion, would that preclude us from being part of the energy aggregation group, Sue?
Well, the energy aggregation group is really only available for municipalities to serve municipal governments, right?
Right,
Correct.
okay.
That's correct. Yep, yep.
So
Okay.
the stuff you're doing with Ampian and Joule is community-based.
Community-based, right, okay.
And while the
But-
municipality could participate in that, they don't have to, right? They could.
Yeah, that's a very good question and a great distinction you're both making. When we created this back in the day, it was very, very clear to us, governments, public benefit corporations, districts, governmental agencies basically could only participate.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, so basically community choice aggregation is basically providing to residents and consumers, right? What's already available to large energy users, what's
Right.
already available to municipalities, you know, so. Yeah.
And that's
Right,
right.
but conversely, to what you said, while we don't participate, we could participate in the community group ourselves as a larger, I
Right,
think Fluent told us, right, they look to get like 60% of commercial larger because they got a good solid base. And then maybe use 40% for the local folks that may come and go here or there. So and that's where, in the last slide here, one of the opportunities is for us to participate in a community solar.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
for community solar, yeah. Then you
Right.
could be the anchor institution for the community solar arrays,
Right.
which would be, yeah. Good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That seems like a natural next step, to be honest, for the county. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it true, guys, maybe you could clarify, my impression with the, New York State recs is one of the reasons they're so expensive, of course, is because those recs have to be consistent with consumption within New York State. Right. So all of the attributes that are getting retired on NIGATs are either being produced within New York State or just outside New York State on transmission lines that are directly going into New York State. So there's a finite quantity of those. And as New York State continues to raise the clean energy standard with no path, with not having achieved any increased production on a large scale of renewable energy, you've simply created a market problem, right? Where the market's doing what the market does. There's a finite quantity, so cost rises.
Mhm.
And until you either get more generation by building utility scale renewables, or you decrease demand, things will be
Mhm.
expensive, right? I mean, it's economics.
Mhm.
And is it also the case that outside of New York State, like people could buy our recs? Like Massachusetts has even more expensive recs. So New York State recs might be attractive to other states. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. Actually, that's part of the reason why New York has to set these prices so high, because we're going to be competing with other states to keep our renewables here. There's a program called the Tier 2 REC, a competitive tier that's coming out this year. That's really its focus, the way I look at it. We're trying to keep our hydro renewables in New York State. And to do that, New York State, we have to pay up, or else they're going to export to Massachusetts and we go backwards.
Is there no avenue for the state government to direct that those have to stay within New York State?
I think it's a market problem. I mean, they're trying to solve it this way. Massachusetts pays a lot for RECs. I mean, it's like $50 maybe. Whereas, so I think the Tier 2 RECs might be 15 is what people are saying, but we won't know till the solicitations happen. But yeah, it's a problem. I mean, New York State, NYSERDA just published their latest progress report for the clean energy standard, and I think New York's at like, I think 27 or 29% renewable, the way they look at renewable, that definition, including Niagara Falls and so forth. And we have to get to 70% by 2030. So, yeah.
Thanks.
I would assume energy or electricity, that's like an international or interstate commerce thing. I don't know if the state could actually restrict that.
Well, I don't know either. I mean, FERC has limited role in electricity. I know they have a lot greater role on natural gas, but New York NYSO, right, is its own entity governed by its own rules. But I don't know enough of that legality, Sean, either.
Any other questions for Sean or Ed or anyone on the telecom?
I could add in one thing that I'd like just the group to be aware of. And again, part of the purpose of this is just so that we're educating the committee, because our consultant will have to dig into this as part of the climate action plan development to explore what our options are. It's great that Sean and Fluent are already thinking about it. They're aware of what we're doing. It's good for them to hear it too, so they can be thinking about what can we do to green our energy more. And as they pointed out, there's some real important aspects of the way our solar farm works. And again, it's 13.6 megawatts. I think we were the largest municipal solar farm at one time in New York State, or at least certainly upstate. But we just get a credit on it, right? But there could the monetary value of that credit be rolled into RECs? It's an option. Also keep in mind too, that so it's 13.6 megawatts. We also produce 6.4 megawatts of power out at Mill Seat Landfill. That's actually owned and operated by our operator, Waste Management. We derive revenue from that, but that again sold out into the market. We don't consume that energy, but there is a monetary benefit. Now that rides on the volatility of the green energy market. So some years we do well, other years, we don't do as well, but we always make a profit, a net profit. But again, there's revenue that's being generated from those green production operations. I call them green because they're alternative, obviously, energy sources. But in aggregate, it's about 20 megawatts, and I think that probably exceeds what the county's energy need is.
Well, that's just what I was going to ask, Mike. What was the total? Did we have a slide on that? The total megawatts of electricity consumed by this energy group? Because I don't think maybe you have the county pulled out from the rest of but I don't know that you do.
This is Ed. What we consider generally the county is over 100 million kilowatt hours annually because of all the DES activities, the water and everything like that. So 100 million kilowatt hours or 100,000 megawatt hours. So it's substantial. Yeah.
And that's the consumption based on the hours, right? And then our megawatt production would translate into a different number that we could compute.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Pete Akampora from Fluent as well. I mean, the county, the EAG in total is over 230 million, of which the county makes up 100 million kilowatt hours a year. So the county is, a little under 50% of the total annual consumption of the EAG.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions, comments from committee members for our guest speakers? I myself just wanted to add, I found the presentation fascinating, and I think one of the goals I have for everybody on the committee is to develop some fluency in the language of sustainability. I find explaining a lot of this to lay folks really challenging, starting with the fact that green electrons aren't indeed green. Then you layer on top of what electricity really is, which is a time rate of change of charge, with RECs, that concept, which is really a label. Then you get into value stacking and so on and so forth. I think over the next several months or year, in fact, we would do ourselves a great service if we could get smart and fluent in the language of the business here, so we can easily and readily explain to our constituents what all this means. Fascinating work, and I really appreciate the insight. There's some huge numbers here when I look at these electric and natural gas costs and savings. So there's a lot of potential for good here, no doubt.
I mean, often it's projected that we could get about a 30% reduction of energy use through conservation. Is that generally the rule of thumb that you gentlemen would use, or do you think? I know you promoting or highlighting a lot of energy conservation measures the county's already put in place in some of these larger facilities. So do you see it as a smaller number that we're likely if we were really ambitious, or any thoughts on that?
Well, so that's the thing is, as far as energy consumption, the way the treatment plant's operated, the way we try to operate the cogen, we do the best we can to reduce the amount of energy we consume to begin with anyway. And then a lot of the smaller groups, like the administrative groups, like the county clerk's office, you can put in lights, LED lights that save you energy. But a lot of the energy that's consumed by DES or the county is done on 24-hour operations, right? The big treatment plants, the big water plants, all those types of things. So we're looking at those as much as we can every day to try to reduce energy consumption there.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that this will be part of the focus of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we built as part of the climate action plan. To Sean's point, you know, a lot of the, I would say, low-hanging fruit in terms of energy efficiency improvements, I feel like the county's already been in the lead on some of that. So for example, at the treatment plants, we have gone from less efficient mechanical aerators for our aeration tanks to fine bubble diffusers. So a lot of the potential, you know, for offsetting the rising cost of RECs may already been, in terms of reducing our energy consumption, may already have been you know, factored in, which really makes then a more compelling case for increasing the ability to increase our capacity for generation.
Mm-hmm. Right. Clem, I'm just wondering if you're aware of any technology out there, you know, short of cold fusion that might enable us to achieve our goal sooner. The LED light is a great example of an energy saving device, which is actually superior than incandescent lights in many, many ways. I'm just wondering if you're aware of any latent technology that might be out at the horizon that could be almost akin to the development of fire, you know, thousands of years ago. Cold fusion might have been that. I don't think that'll happen anytime soon, but just curious if there's anything out there.
I'm personally
yeah, the same question.
I'm personally not aware of anything like that that would be, you know, something we could jump right
Real
on. But
game changer.
you know, again, you know, I think, you know, my thought is we're going to be making, you know, incremental improvements that will aggregate to a much larger effect at this point. But you know, there are some promising technologies out there that, you know, when we talk about electricity, you know, I think part of the issue is in terms of being able to generate it offline and then store it. So, you know, some of the technologies we're talking about with battery storage and things, I think those will come into play in the longer term. As it relates to what the county does, again, it will have to be a case-by-case basis, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
Well, I know this is kind of, I'm sorry, Sue, you want to go ahead?
Well, I was just going to ask you, so the county can enter into power purchase agreements, correct? For electrons? Okay. Is there any limitation on, like, I know that's typically done with solar arrays, but for example, we have a nuclear facility that's down the road, which may only be around for 5 more years, but are those generators not able to offer power purchase agreements? Because those are already subsidized on our behalf and carbon free, or are they prohibited from that? Do you know?
Well, I know NIPA, right, who has power generation out at Niagara Falls, we can enter into agreements with them. They're starting to be very aggressive in terms of what they can offer for hydropower. The ZEC program is what's helping to keep Gannett going. So I don't know, Ed, maybe you know if we can actually participate in a PPA with them and then turn around and maybe lose the benefit of the ZEC. I'm not sure.
I mean, anything's possible if you could get them agree to that, but it's highly unlikely. That's not something that they would do.
Can you explain that? Why would such a large generator, is it just that much?
It's because it's so large and the county's large, but not large enough to waste time to do something like that, would be my guess. I'm not sure there'd be any financial, I'm not sure what the benefit would be, you know, because we wouldn't even get RECs from that, because it's, you know, you might be able to claim some emission difference, but it wouldn't produce a usable green attribute. Nuclear is really good for the emission side. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about how we've structured, or how the state keeps trying to structure the markets around these things, when my understanding is we've bailed them out because they can't compete in the competitive wholesale market. So it would seem like entering into power purchase agreements with entities would be beneficial. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this.
Yeah, well, the reason I would say never to do it is because the county would have to take a large financial risk That's why. So you can't just, you would have to agree on a price for some long number of years. And, what's a good price? I don't know. You could end up paying double what the market rate is. I mean, this past year is the lowest price on record. So a lot of people with fixed price arrangements are paying 100% more than what they would have. Depends what kind of stomach for that type of risk.
Well, for sure. And this points to the problem with using a market that's full of fossil fuels and highly subsidized fossil fuels to try and solve a climate problem, right? Because the market is low in electricity because natural gas is cheap. Natural gas is cheap is because we had a warm winter and we're fracking all over the country, right? So I struggle constantly with this complexity that we're trying to create markets and say yes to renewables, but never saying no to fossil fuels. So it's just something I think that we have to struggle with.
They're working on that. The NISO is working on a sort of a carbon tax policy that to bake it into the economic models of the NISO market. That hasn't happened yet, but once that happens, that will sort of set things along that course.
Yeah, well, it's similar to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative has a carbon price that's embedded in that, and yet fossil fuels aren't gone from the electric markets yet, right? So it's great to put in a price. If the price doesn't reflect highly enough to drive those entities out of the market, then it's still a failure from a climate perspective, right? So I know NISO is looking at a carbon tax, and there's several other suggestions. And at some point, I don't, depending on what the state does, is there an avenue for the county to look at what the biggest polluters are in the county and trying to facilitate the shift away from fossil fuels through some kind of polluter pay mechanism? I don't know.
Well, so that is going to be a big challenge for us. So I showed you about Van Laer and the treatment plants, right? They were able to get rid of natural gas because they could do something else with the biosolids.
Right.
We're a large consumer of natural gas for the CHP. So we're trying to reduce that, but we still need a lot of natural gas for all the boilers we do for heating around the area. Chrysler District Heating has the same thing. To convert that to electric, the cost of steam and everything just went up significantly. So it's a hard nut to crack. We definitely have to be looking at it though.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there are some manufacturers in the state that have moved to geothermal for producing steam for some facilities. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Good deal. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions for our guests this afternoon?
So I was gonna just add on to, and somebody mentioned New York Power Authority and maybe a purchase of Niagara Falls Power, but we have a big waterfall downtown, and I think of our resources that we have in our backyard, and that seems like something, Clement mentioned battery storage. We have a elevation difference. We have a body of water. There's pumped hydro storage available out there if you're talking about technologies that are available.
Oh yeah, Argini already has two hydro plants there, right? They got the one at Upper Falls and they have Station 5 down at Driving Park.
So I guess I don't know where I'm going with that, other than if we could buy cheap hydro from New York Power Authority like my village and Spencerport does, that seems like it'd be an easy win. And if there's any way we could utilize or capitalize on big waterfall in the city of Rochester, these are things that are right in our backyard, right in our scope boundary area. So just thoughts, I guess. And the politics of that and the rules and laws of how that all can happen are, I'm sure, very complex. So easier said than done.
Yeah.
A good thought, John. Well, let me thank our guest speakers again, Sean and Ed, and all our friends from Fluent. Fascinating conversation, great presentation. No doubt this will spawn questions in the future, and we may very well ask Mike to have you come back and speak to us again as we get smarter and as the plan matures. Any other last thoughts or comments before we adjourn? Yeah, Sue, go ahead. Yeah.
Just thanks.
Yeah, thanks again. Oh, you're welcome. It was our pleasure.
Fascinating presentation and some spirited conversation. If that is the case, I'm going to recommend that we go ahead and adjourn. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 4th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will make the motion. I just wanted to mention before we close, though, that we had discussed with Mike Garland as we move into the process with Bergman, and Clem mentioned they had a great kickoff meeting, that for future agendas and meetings, we're going to ask that there just be an update on what's happened between meetings, so that the committee can kind of keep up with the process. And along those same lines of future agendas, we encourage anybody who has an idea, something they'd like to talk about during the meeting, about a week to 2 weeks before the meeting, let us know so that there's time to get it on the agenda. With that, though, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Michael. Do we have a second? Okay, I think Sue is seconding. She's nodding. Now we've got the hand.
But
All
I
right.
just wanted to add, Michael, that's a great point, and I plan on doing that. We will have definitely on every agenda now, starting next month, we will have a status reports on what's going on with the climate action plan. As we
Much
progress.
appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the time is right, Joe, based on your activity
yeah.
this week, and even something like a crude linear timeline might be helpful
Yep.
to the whole
Oh, yeah.
committee as
Yep.
well, because
You know,
now you're moving. Yeah.
Completely transparent. We'll,
We kick this off and we're making forward progress, which is
yeah,
fantastic.
we would have done this earlier. I just, got hung up with resolutions and, contracts and this and that, but we're ready to move.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Right.
All right. Well, we've got a motion and a second. Let me recommend that we go ahead and adjourn. Many thanks to everybody. And please, by all means, stay warm and healthy until we meet up again on Thursday afternoon, March 4th. How's that?
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank
Yep,
you.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
everybody.
Lots.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Yep,
bet.
thanks, folks.
Thank you.